When Ricimer arrested and executed the Emperor Majorian in August 461, it is entirely likely that he didn't think it would be that big of a deal. Sure, it might be a little scandalous, but as PR problems go, it would almost certainly blow over. After all, Ricimer was the real power behind the throne. Everyone knew it, so it wasn't like this was a coup or something. More like a CEO firing his COO. But Ricimer underestimated the popularity of Majorian. Living in Italy and surrounded by a bunch of Italian aristocrats who had soured on the emperor, it might have seemed to Ricimer like the whole empire hated Majorian and was ready for him to go. But this was not so. Majorian's policies may have been ticking off Ricimer and the Italian nobility, but that did not mean that they were ticking off anyone else. So when Majorian was killed, these anyone else's were shocked and angry, and as we're about to see, they were not going to take it lying down. Two of these anyone else's are of particular interest. The first was the general I mentioned last week, the guy whose name I told you to remember. Do you remember his name? That's right, it's Aegidius. Aegidius had risen up through the ranks with Majorian, and as you'll recall, one of Majorian's first acts as emperor was to make Aegidius Magister Militum, the commander-in-chief of Gaul. Aegidius had then spent 4 years repacifying the region and getting it back under the thumb of the central imperial government. That mission was about to take an ironic twist. Aegidius was up in northern Gaul in 461 when word reached him that his old friend Majorian had been killed. Now, I don't know if Aegidius's reaction to Ricimer's coup took the form of a dramatic declaration, or if it was just passive-aggressive cold shouldering, but the minute Majorian's head hit the ground, Aegidius stopped taking orders from Italy. The general who had just spent 4 years reminding everyone he came across that the imperial government was still the legal sovereign, and as such fealty was not a suggestion, but a duty, yeah, that guy is declaring his independence from Ravenna. And this would not turn out to be a short-lived thing. Historians will wind up calling the territory Aegidius controlled in northern Gaul the domain of Soissons, named after the modern French city of Soissons that stands roughly at the center of Aegidius's little kingdom. The domain would continue on as a quasi-Roman rump state even after the fall of the Western Empire, until this last little outpost of Roman order was finally overrun by the Franks in 486. Well, okay, said Ricimer. We've got a rogue general up in Gaul refusing to take orders. That's not such a big deal. I can handle that. But that was not all Ricimer was up against. Another of Majorian's generals, a man named Marcellinus, had exactly the same reaction to Ricimer's coup as Aegidius. Marcellinus was in control of Dalmatia, which at this point in history had drifted back into the western orbit. Though when Majorian died, Marcellinus was in Sicily. He had been in place there to help run one arm of Majorian's planned invasion of North Africa, the invasion that had stalled when Majorian's Spanish fleet had been sunk by the Vandals. But when Marcellinus found out that the emperor was dead, he booked it back to his home territory double time. And when he got there, he found out that Ricimer had already tried to bribe the Dalmatian garrisons, mostly Hun mercenaries, out from under Marcellinus, which, as you can imagine, did not go over too well with Marcellinus. So like his colleague Aegidius up in Gaul, Marcellinus simply stopped taking orders from Italy. But unlike Aegidius, who was wedged between a failing empire, some barbarian kingdoms, and the English Channel, Marcellinus was wedged in between the two halves of the empire. So rather than declaring de facto independence, Marcellinus simply turned east, wrote to Leo in Constantinople and said, hey, this guy Ricimer just overthrew the guy you yourself recognize to be the lawful emperor. I'm not going to follow him anymore, but I'd be happy to follow you. So consider this my declaration of defection. But this was not all Ricimer was now up against. although most of his problems were caused by people ticked off about his little coup, yet another problem was caused by a guy who was not so much ticked off as excited about the opportunity the coup presented. And here we are talking about our old friend King Genseric of the Vandals. Now, before I go on, I would like to say that it sort of feels like Genseric has been around forever. He first showed up back in 428 AD, which was 8 episodes back when we were talking about the rise of Aetius. And now here he is 33 years later, still going strong. So he's got to be getting old, right? Like, pretty soon we're going to be dealing with a new king of the Vandals, right? Wrong. The dude is going to outlive the Western Empire. He isn't going to die until January 477, at the age of 88, and after having ruled for almost 50 years. Which is just, you know, way to go, Genseric. So anyway, King Genseric, who was by a healthy margin now the senior statesman of the Western Empire and father-in-law of the imperial princess Eudoxia the Younger, took the death of Majorian as an opportunity to influence who would be chosen as his successor. The man Genseric backed was a senator by the name of Anicius Olybrius. Why Anicius Olybrius? Well, because he was married to Placidia, the other imperial princess currently enjoying the hospitality of the Vandals. Once nearly engaged to Majorian, and then formally engaged to Aetius' son, Placidia had finally wound up married to Senator Olybrius shortly after the murder of her father, Valentinian III. Though I don't believe there's any firm proof to this one way or the other, it is supposed that Olybrius was related to Valentinian's executioner/successor, Petronius Maximus. You'll recall that when Maximus seized power, he tried to give his new and ultimately short-lived regime the veneer of legitimacy by marrying the imperial widow Licinia Eudoxia and then marrying the younger Eudoxia to his son. It is supposed that Olybrius was a cousin or something of Maximus's, and his marriage to Placidia was a part of this larger legitimacy project. But so far, the marriage had not really amounted to anything. Olybrius had been in Constantinople when Genseric sacked Rome, and then spirited away his new bride, so it's not like the two could have spent much time around one another. But because he was in Constantinople when Maximus fell, Olybrius managed to survive the regime change. And then, because he remained in the East in a state of semi-exile, he managed to live through the next regime change as well. So when Ricimer initiated the third regime change in 6 years, Olybrius was still alive, still married to Placidia, and, since he had been living in Constantinople for half a decade, on fairly good terms with Leo and the court of the East. When word came that Majorian was dead, Genseric stepped forward and boldly proclaimed that Senator Olybrius was the only man in the empire with any kind of legitimate claim to the imperial throne. A husband of the unjustly deposed Theodosian family, he would return honor and dignity and blah, blah, blah. The bottom line is that Olybrius was now as much a part of Genseric's family as he was of the Theodosian family, so Genseric wanting him on the throne of the West was a no-brainer. But Ricimer wasn't having this for a second. If the problem with Majorian had been that Ricimer couldn't sufficiently control him, then there was no way the general was going to accept Olybrius, who would be part creature of the Vandals and part creature of Constantinople. Plus, Olybrius' legitimacy was going to flow from his marriage to Placidia, rather than from the patronage of Ricimer. So in Ricimer's mind, I doubt there was a worse candidate for the throne than Olybrius. Genseric stepped up the pressure by intensifying Vandal raids on the Italian coast, promising to shut them down only if Olybrius was elevated, but Ricimer refused to budge. After a 3-month interregnum, Ricimer finally found a candidate more to his liking. Someone dull, weak-willed, and entirely dependent on Ricimer. Enter Libius Severus. Dull, weak-willed, entirely dependent on Ricimer, Livius Severus. We know almost nothing about the new would-be emperor until he suddenly appears in Ravenna accepting the diadem in November of 461. Not that it really matters. Livius Severus is not exactly the linchpin of Roman history. During the reign of Majorian, Ricimer may have fancied himself the power behind the throne, but it's pretty clear that Majorian himself, and a good number of other people, considered it to be more of a partnership. With the elevation of Severus, though, this ambiguity was gone. Ricimer was the power behind the throne. These are the years where you have references to King Ricimer. Not references mocking his hubris, mind you, but just straight up references to King Ricimer, because that's basically what he now was. As I mentioned a few episodes back, the famous historian J.B. Barrie once said that Ricimer was the link between Stilicho and Odoacer, and was the first German to be virtual king of Italy. Now, 15 years down the road, we're going to have a real German king of Italy, and the pro forma nature of Odoacer's seizure of power finds its roots here in the days of Ricimer, who, during these years, went so far as to possibly coin money in his own name. We're not 100% sure that he coined money in his own name, but there are good reasons to believe that he did. And I think it's telling that if it turns out to be true, no one is going to be surprised in the slightest. The elevation of Severus was, of course, only really recognized in Italy, and so King Ricimer's power did not really extend that far. Up in Gaul, Aegidius was essentially in revolt, as was Marcellinus in Dalmatia. The Eastern Augustus, Leo, for his part, never recognized Severus, though for the moment he was not looking to make or break relations with the West over the issue of Majorian's murder and Severus's elevation. Now, Marcellinus was apparently prepared to storm Italy as soon as the spring of 462 arrived and asked for Leo's support, but the Eastern Emperor refused to give it, instead counseling patience. Not wanting to make any bold moves without Constantinople's backing, Marcellinus took the counsel and sat on his hands. But he was done taking orders from Ricimer. The de facto king's first concern, though, was the situation in Gaul. If he tried to attack Marcellinus first, he might incur the wrath of Leo. So better to settle the north before worrying about the east. But if he wanted to maintain his iron grip on Italy, Ricimer knew he couldn't go marching off to retake Gaul himself. He needed to find a capable subordinate to do the job for him. Now, he couldn't send the quote-unquote Emperor Severus. Not only was he likely thoroughly inexperienced in military affairs, but sending an emperor off to win back Gaul had almost certainly been one of the keys to the breakdown in the relationship between Majorian and Ricimer. Majorian had been starting to forge an independent power base for himself, and we can't have that. Better to find some suitably motivated underling and send him off to get the job done. Ricimer had the perfect candidate in an old soldier named Agrippinus. What recommended Agrippinus for the job? Well, for starters, he had been Avitus's Magister Militum for Gaul, which meant that he was the one who had been replaced by Aegidius when Majorian came to power. But the fun did not stop there. A native of Gaul himself, Agrippinus had not gone quietly into that good night, nor had Aegidius given him any reason to. Eventually, the feud between the two men led Aegidius to accuse Agrippinus of treason. Sent down to Rome to stand for his crime, Agrippinus was found guilty and sentenced to death. He managed to escape his captivity, however, and then seek asylum in the old St. Peter's, where he remained until he was officially pardoned. The details of all this are, of course, really vague, but the assumption is that the official pardon came after the death of Majorian, round about the time Ricimer was looking for someone to lead the effort to repacify Gaul and defeat the rebel Aegidius. And what better man to lead that effort than Agrippinus, who had lost his job and then very nearly lost his life to Aegidius. When Agrippinus reached Gaul sometime in 462, he did exactly the same thing Majorian had done when he entered Gaul back in 458. He made a beeline for the Goths. But unlike Majorian, who was looking to defeat and repacify the Goths, Agrippinus was looking to befriend and re-empower them. And when he arrived in Aquitaine, he found the Goths very receptive to the imperial proposals, because said proposals promised the Goths something they had been hankering for since they first put down roots in Gaul, a Mediterranean port to call their very own.